Okay, good evening. I declare the Ordinary Council meeting of the 30th of July 2024 held in Council Chambers at Level 2, 388 Hay Street, open at 5:31pm. Welcome councillors, welcome staff, media. Actually, I don't know where Lloyd is. Welcome to the public as well. It's nice to have an audience. You're very welcome. Okay, I'll take attendances now. Councillor Johnston's overseas. She is on approved leave. If she was able to dial in, she was going to, but I haven't had any messages, so I think we'll take her as absent tonight. And it looks like the remaining elected members are present and in person, which I like to see. The executive leadership team are all here in person as well, and we'll announce the remaining staff members as and when needed. Okay, as far as I know, there's no applications for leave of absence. We'll move on to disclosures. Councillor O'Connor, a disclosure in relation to item C2.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's a impartiality interest. I spoke against the development at the JDAP in December 2023 in my capacity as a Subiaco resident and also a heritage practitioner.
Very good. If there's no other disclosures, we will move on. Public question time. There's a few this evening, five in fact. We'll begin with a question from Rohit Mehra of Hay Street, Subiaco.
Good evening, everyone. My question is a bit different to the other ones. We just want to introduce ourselves. We just taken over a snap print Subiaco, and just wondering that how can this local council help us to grow our business? I have tried to send the emails to procurement team, didn't receive anything. Tried to connect at the reception and left the business cards, but did not receive anything. Thank you.
That question's best answered by Director Corporate Services.
Thank you, and thank you for the introduction. So the city has a range of activities to support local businesses. So these include business attraction and retention strategies, destination marketing, place activation and business support programs. So in relation to our purchasing practices, when the city requires goods or services such as printing, which I believe that your business offers, the city staff seek quotations from suitable suppliers in accordance with our purchasing policy, which is available on our website. As specified by the purchasing policy, we undertake procurement with consideration to local economic benefit and preferences given to local businesses subject to price, quality, service and any other relevant factors being equal. The city also provides annual reporting on the extent of local purchasing. So for the year ended 30th of June 2023, the city procured over $4 million from businesses with a City of Subiaco address. So that equates to around 14% of total purchase orders raised. So in regards to your specific business, our requirement for specific services like printing can vary. If you'd like to speak further, please contact our customer service team who can put you in touch with the right staff member. So, thanks.
Thank you. Maybe after this bit. We'll also take a question from Robert Cresswell of York Street, Subiaco, a question on C1. Okay. Sharon Williams of Larrendale Road, City Beach, a question on C1. Ms. Williams.
Good evening. Question 1. The agenda states Subiaco Oval will be occupied during many parts of the day, given its arrangement with Bob Hawke College, Community Sport and the WAFC. It is likely that residents of the development will rely on alternate public open space reserves. End quote. This is an extraordinary statement, particularly when the offshore developer is only delivering 342 apartments, or around 12% of all the apartments planned in the Subiaco East redevelopment area. The the statement indicates the Subi East Master Plan is producing a community that is not sustainable, nor providing the necessary elements of a livable community. Basic amenity, including green space, playing fields, primary and high schools, new residents will require are all lacking. There has been large-scale opposition recorded against the DWA Vision, Master Plan, design guidelines and other aspects. Over 92% rejected DWA's vision, and a large percent of over 500 submissions called for their council's adopted position of a minimum 1.73 hectares of replacement playing fields, plus the oval to address significant known shortages. Shouldn't the city be including the adopted position of council with regards to playing fields at Subi East, calling for the master plan to be revised and recommending the refusal of the controversial development application? Would you like me to go on to question 2 or answer that one first?
It's entirely up to you.
Okay, I'll go on to question... No, actually, can I have an answer, please?
Sure, let's do that. They're long questions and reasonably detailed answers. Director of Development Services.
Beautiful, thank you. And through you, Mayor, thank you for the question. So Development WA, also known as the Metropolitan Redevelopment Authority, has referred this DA, this development application, to the city, and that's done under the Metropolitan Authority Redevelopment Act, so that's Section 64. So in considering the application, the city has focused its comment on the particulars of the development which has been proposed, and that's consistent with our requirements of what we're supposed to be doing under legislation, and that's to ensure that important planning and technical matters are considered by the authority when they are looking at the application. So after that assessment, and on balance, the city's officers believe that the proposal is consistent with the strategic planning framework, and it has been recommended for approval in accordance with that. A referral request is not the right or appropriate mechanism to reconsider the planning framework for Subiaco East redevelopment area, and the city has expressed its position in relation to the shortfall of active open playing space and feels over a number of years in the formulation of the planning, the strategic planning and the statutory planning instruments.
Thank you. Ms Williams, your second question.
Okay, so this month a DWA representative indicated that the offshore developer was having significant issues with delivering a local community benefit. The developer requires this to gain the extra height and other discretions they are seeking to maximise their profits and supply luxury penthouses. I was very surprised to read in the OCM agenda that the city appears to be bending over backwards for the developer after a private meeting with them in June. The city is advancing an option that is inside the Subiaco East redevelopment area, which is not part of the city's responsibility. The city's website states Development WA is the state government design and development agency responsible for the Subi East redevelopment. Furthermore, the DWA Subiaco Scheme Redevelopment 2 states a key objective for the precinct will be to facilitate quality pedestrian, cycling and public transport linkages to improve the connectivity of the Subiaco East project area. This is also articulated in various Subiaco East master plan maps. Why then is the city taking on a responsibility that is not theirs, and what recent consultation has occurred which supports a possible $1 or $2 million or more contribution from the City of Subiaco ratepayers so UEM Sunrise can illustrate local community benefit?
Thanks, Ms Williams. Mr Petrovski.
Thank you again, and through you, Mayor. So we believe that local governments are best placed to recommend community benefits as they are closest to their communities, and we have the technical experience and expertise so we can recommend opportunities for improvements. Infrastructure requires regular upgrade and maintenance over time, and that is ordinarily budgeted for by local government. Community benefit contributions reduce the funding required from, or the initial funding required from local governments. It is common for local governments to include conditions for developers to improve assets used by all community members and in turn reduce the initial cost to ratepayers. This has been recommended in this instance as the development proposed is considered suitable in its strategic context. There is also always an opportunity cost of not undertaking upgrades in a timely manner, which simply means that costs are shifted to future generations and are increased as the state of assets decline. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from Peter McDonald of Onslow Road, Shenton Park. Another question on C1. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Councillors. On the 10th of October last year, the Honourable John Carey, Minister for Planning, answered a question on notice in the Legislative Assembly from the Honourable Dr David Honey MP and Member for Cottesloe, and advised that lots 1 and 2 of the western side of the Oval had been sold to UEM for $22.19 million. This followed Minister Carey's earlier statement in the Legislative Assembly on 31 August 2023 that UEM had been chosen as the developer for those lots, and followed on from Minister Carey's media release to the same effect on the 16th of August. And UEM themselves issued a public statement on the 15th of August 2023 confirming they'd purchased lots 1 and 2. So the reported purchase of lots 1 and 2 happened more than 11.5 months ago, nearly 12 months ago. And before I go on, I just want to pass a special thank you to Dr Honey for having asked those questions in Parliament for the local community, which we very much appreciated. My first question is, can the City advise who currently owns lots 1 and 2?
Mr. McDonald, it might be best, given they're reasonably short questions and they flow from one to the other, if you just ask them all, if you're happy with that.
Yep. If UEM's not the current owner, does the City know whether UEM has the right not to proceed with the purchase? For example, if various conditions are not satisfied, or if the purchase is merely an option to purchase. Given the City is a major stakeholder in this proposed development, has Development WA supplied the City with copies of all contracts it's entered into with UEM in relation to this development?
Thank you. Director, Development Services.
Do you want me to turn the microphone off?
Beautiful, thank you, and through you, Mayor. So Development WA is the landowner of lots 1 and 2, and that's detailed in our report to Council. City officers haven't been and are not involved or aware of any of the contractual arrangements which have been made for the sale of the lots.
Thank you. The final question comes from Rachel Wheeler of Daglish Street, Wembley. Two questions on C1. Ms. Wheeler.
Oops. Just the first question regarding the Subi Oval Shared Use Agreement. Can you please confirm the shared use agreement framework for Subiaco Oval in relation to exclusive use to the Bob Hawke College students and the Waffle? And can you please confirm what is the Council's duty of care during the use of their facilities during these times?
Director, Technical Services.
Thank you. And in response to your question, so the City has a duty of care for So the City has a duty of care for all of its active reserves to ensure they are suitable standard for use. However, during exclusive use by Bob Hawke College, school staff are responsible for students, as is the case in all schools. And obviously, it's worth mentioning that the Subiaco Shared Use Agreement is publicly available on the City's website as well.
Thank you. So just confirm that's the Monday to Friday, 8 till 4 for the students, and Waffle currently Monday to Thursday, 4 till 9, and Saturday morning. Yep. Thank you.
All right, your second question, please.
Thank you. Just regarding infill pressure. Oops. Can you please confirm why the City of Subiaco is in favour of building 73 73 stories of apartment blocks and 400 metres of commercial space within 10 metres of the only oval available to Bob Hawke College students. In the 2015 $3.5 million Perth and Peel target setting, the City of Subiaco was given a target of 6,140 dwellings, which it has already determined the path to meet this number. The City of Subiaco is already the second densest suburb after the City of Vic Park without these additional dwellings. The WA Planning Commission has now added to your target 2,700 for Subi East, and it's just got the breakdown of where they are. Why does the City of Subiaco support such significant further infill when this very first development does not have sufficient green space and is already looking to use Market Square, which is across a busy road, and there's no traffic survey or impact assessment to sufficiently assess even this first development?
Thank you. That question's best answered by Director of Development Services.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. So in June 2017, the state government announced a new inner city school, and that will be built in as part of a new community precinct at Subiaco East. And following this decision, Development WA has been responsible for the development of the Subi East Master Plan and the relevant design guidelines that are now guiding development, which is proposed in the area. The city's local planning strategy was also endorsed in 2020, and that provides a framework for the city's integrated and sustainable planning and development over the next 10 to 15 years. In the strategy, we carefully balance the need for infill development in certain precincts with the protection of character and heritage areas which are highly valued by the community. As outlined in the report, Subi East absorbs much of the city's infill dwelling targets. It takes about 34% by 2050. In terms of technical studies, there have been traffic studies that have been reviewed by the city's officers, and recommendations are made to Development WA and the applicant as detailed in the report. The matters to be addressed in the technical studies are not uncommon in many development applications, and if the city was the responsible authority, it might be a little bit different, where much of these would have been addressed through the assessment of the development application, but we are only a referral authority in this instance. Our role is to make these recommendations to Development WA, who are the decision maker, and we absolutely expect Development WA to carefully consider and implement all of the city's recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. So can I just clarify, you did mention 2050 in relation to Subi East, but my understanding is your infill are not connected. So 2050 or 6,000 is separate from this additional. And the traffic study hasn't been completed based on last week's discussion for this particular DA. Is that correct?
Okay, we'll take those as two final questions.
So
Ms. Petrovsky.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. So the first question about density. So the local planning strategy does actually cover Subiaco East as well. So the city's targets include, I believe, 2,900 for Subiaco East and roughly 5,500, if I can remember from the top of my head, for the remaining of Subiaco. But the strategy does actually include Subiaco East. The traffic studies will be completed as part of the assessment of the application, and that is for Development WA to consider.
Thanks, Ms. Petrovsky. Okay, that's the end of public question time, and it's just occurred to me that in my haste to get started, I didn't do an acknowledgement of country. We are on our reconciliation journey, and we've just launched our RAPs. So on behalf of the City of Subiaco, I will acknowledge that we're meeting on the traditional lands of the Whadjuk Noongar people, and I will recognise their ongoing connection to the land and waterways of Subiaco. And on that note, we can move on to public statement time. We've got a few on C1 and one on C2 as far as I can see. Firstly, a statement on C1, submitted by Akatai James of Catherine Street, Subiaco. The statement's to be read by Peter McDonald.
Sorry, just to clarify, was that for Akatai James?
I'm sure I got the pronunciation wrong, but yes, it is.
Okay. Oh, good. Right. The following statement relates to the UEM Sunrise application to build a 36 and 26-storey residential tower on Lot 1 and an 11-storey tower on Lot 2 at the Subiaco Oval site. As a resident of a heritage-listed townhouse in Catherine Street, Subiaco, I'm gravely concerned with the UEM proposal due to the following things. Firstly, overshadowing. The proposal risks damage to my heritage-listed property. The overshadowing will increase dampness and potential mould during the winter months. Due to being a townhouse, parts of my home can be cold and dark in winter, and I rely on the winter sun that will be blocked by the tower. I am concerned about the reduced sunlight to my courtyard and the impact on my greenery, including herbaceous plants requiring the sunlight during winter. Secondly, I'm opposed to the proposed proposal due to the lack of privacy, as my kitchen and living area will be exposed to residents of the tower. As a medical professional who works long hours, the comfort of my home is crucial to me being able to rest and recover in peace and privacy. With a glass exterior facing the proposed site, I will lose this privacy. The UEM application risks the well-being of residents and the integrity of holistic sites, historical sites in the affected precinct. And I must say just about the Catherine Street precinct, which is immediately east of the Subiaco 1 tower, that in summer they lose their light in the afternoons. So the cruel twist is that some of these properties are going to lose afternoon light in summer and morning light in winter. I ask that this application be rejected unless height restrictions are enforced to avoid the above-mentioned issues becoming apparent. Thank you for your time in considering this matter.
Thank you. Well, you may as well stay up there, Mr McDonald, because the next statement comes from your good self. Another statement on C1.
Okay. The enormous shadow from the proposed UEM development will, from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. on the winter solstice, sweep across about 126 properties to the south of the towers and on and south of Roberts Road. There's never been a case in the history of the city, as far as I know, where so many properties stand to be overshadowed by a single development. The properties subject to the overshadowing are a mixture of businesses and residences, some with swimming pools, many with solar panels and/or north-facing living spaces and private rear gardens. Every extra floor in height on the taller of these towers, at 36 storeys and 125 metres in height, not counting roof plant, results in more properties coming under the sweep of this shadow, and also increases the number of days each year that all of these properties are overshadowed. How long each property is in shadow on the winter solstice, what time of day the shadow starts passing over a property, and how many days of the year a given property is subject to the shadow varies, and in some cases varies significantly, depending on the position of the property relative to the position of the proposed towers and on the ultimate height, orientation and building envelopes of the towers themselves. The modelling to determine the shadow impact on these properties south of the proposed towers is complex and certainly beyond the capabilities of the homeowners concerned. Neither the City nor UEM, each of which has access to shadow modelling software and expertise that is up to this task, has offered the affected property owners any assistance with the shadow modelling. The ratepayers in the shadow impacted properties have been abandoned in this process. They have received no help from any of the City, DevWA, UEM, or for that matter from their local member, the Honourable Dr. Katrina Stratton. Tonight, as our City councillors, you face a decision on what feedback to give to this decision maker. Included within that feedback is the issue of the height of the towers. However, you yourselves have not been given an appropriate level of shadow modelling to make an informed decision on whether additional height concessions are warranted. Two more paras. How could you sign off on supporting additional floors if you do not know what overshadowing impact this will have on which properties for how many days of the year? The trade-off between a developer-provided community benefit in Market Square and height concessions is not the only trade-off in play here. There are other angles to this. What you're being asked to consider is taking the warmth, energy and health benefits of winter sunlight away from the 126 existing properties south of the towers and permanently giving those benefits to the owners of upmarket, upper storey apartments in the towers. Thank you.
Well, that's the last statement on C1 on my list, but CEO, I understand there's been a bit of to and forth with a submitter who is here and who would like to make a statement. It was submitted within time, and the said statement has been trimmed a little bit, and the city's happy to hear it. Tony Costa, Forest Road, Forest Street. We'll get your address later, Mr. Costa, but please come to the podium, make your statement, and it's nice to see you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and councillors, and dare I say, administration. I wish to submit the following facts in regard to this proposed development that, if accepted, will further desecrate and diminish the since 1904 heritage listed community used Subiaco Municipal Reserve and Oval, as your constituents have always known it as being so named. The city administration recommendations to the DWA that this DWA referral of the Malaysian government-owned developer UEM Sunrise Berhad must not also be supported in its present form, if at all, due to the following factors. 1, the City of Subiaco will meet the state government's density requirements without considering this unsustainable development, notwithstanding this proposal development site. Like the Bob Hawke College, which I choose to refer to as the Hazel Hawke School, were proposed in the wrong unsustainable sites. 2, the Save Subiaco Oval Action Group Forum has a huge question mark also as to whether the state government-owned development, WA, have the power to rezone this 4.931 M2 of the heritage-listed Crown Local Communities public land, and on sell any part of Lot 501 Roberts Road for that matter to a foreign Malaysian government-owned developer, UEM Sunrise Berhad, in the first place. 3, as a result of the state and local government agencies and misconduct perpetrated throughout the last 6 years and in around this Subi East redevelopment project, Save Subiaco Oval Action Group have respectfully called for a Royal Commission inquiry investigation into this project. Number 4, parking, travel, wind tunnel testing, traffic safety and signage plans must be updated and submitted for approval before any form of acceptances are ever considered. Number 5, tree preservation zones and structural root zones must be.
Mr. Costa, your allocated time's up. How much more have you got to go? I don't have an approved statement in front of me.
Well, with the greatest of respect, I've got I think I was just, when you interrupted, I was on...
Well, your time was up, but if you've only got a few more points left, I'm happy to let you finish those. Please continue. Just remember to press...
No record of this contribution to this very council.
Just remember to press your button so that we record it for all posterity.
What button to press? There's enough buttons being pressed against me as it is.
It's your microphone button. We want to make sure we hear you.
It's on now. It's on. Okay. You're saying you can't hear me, is that it? We can hear you. You can? I thought you could. Okay. Yes. It was, yes. I talked about the tree preservation. Okay. Number 6, affordable housing, paramount. Noise management and the type of mixed developments must be clearly defined and certainly not left to the trust. Mr. Mayor has suggested can be afforded to the planning staff. All of these definitions must be transparently submitted openly to the Subiaco community. And 2 more points to go, Mr. Mayor. Upgrades to the full hard and soft landscaping of Market Square and Hayden Bunton Drive, public realm, will never provide adequate POS recreational use land for any increase in population when it has already been rendered inadequate for the current population. And number 9, councillors must take note that Subiaco Oval, Municipal Oval, and the Subiaco Municipal Oval gates are on the State Register of Heritage Places as Level 1, a place of state significance, which City Council and the Heritage Council continue to ignore. Our earnest recommendation is that Council does not support their officer's recommendation and supplies reasons for their decision not to support Development WA's referral until more concrete information is supplied to Council for their due consideration. Sincerely, AV Tony Costa, Chairman, and in our absence, Ross Carson, Secretary for the Save Subiaco Oval Action Group. Thank you again for your courtesy.
Thank you, Mr. Costa. We'll move on to statements on C2. We've got a single statement submitted from Jackie Greenshields of Salisbury Street, Subiaco. Ms. Greenshields, your statement on C2.
Mine might be a little hard to follow after that one. C2. Dear CEO, council members and staff. Subiaco residents, ratepayers and businesses are fortunate to have a contemporary town planning scheme to guide development while protecting our heritage and character streetscape, all that is unique to Subi and what we love. The LPP for the Rockaby Road and Hay Street Heritage Area, by way of a map, clearly defines the contributory status of the buildings, the shops, the hospitality venues and so on of the heritage area. As you may observe, the green buildings, which offer considerable contribution, are dispersed around the town centre, with only 2 sites remaining on the northern side of Hay Street. These 100-plus-year-old buildings, the Old West's Theatre at 440 Hay Street, built in 1911, and the rare row of 7 shops at 424 to 436 Hay Street, are up for the JDAP consideration for demolition in favour of a modern building that does not have the support of the Design Review Panel. If they are demolished, not only does JDAP open the floodgates for the destruction of the heritage of our town centre, considering all of those green shaded buildings, but also the loss of these unique, authentic buildings, which are rare and culturally important to the city. And please see the photos attached and sent to the councillors independently. I therefore support the officer's recommendations to refuse the application to ensure that the city retains its cultural heritage streetscape, which Subiaco is so well recognised for. Thank you. That's probably one of my favourite pictures. I know we're not meant to show pictures, but that's sitting at the Rockaby Road, the Subiaco Hotel, looking across to the theatre. The streetscape's amazing. So.
Thank you for the statement. Okay, that's the end of public statements. There were no approved petitions or deputations. We'll therefore seek to move and confirm minutes of the previous meeting. I'm not sure what you'd be doing at this point.
So I sent in a submission and I asked for your allowance to speak, and I haven't actually had a response to say whether I could or not, sorry. So I just wanted to, so my daughter and I, we're representing...
Okay, well, if our governance team hasn't responded, then that would have been an oversight, but the reason your statement wasn't allowed would be because you're not a resident or a ratepayer of the City of Subiaco. So that's quite clearly in accordance with the public statement procedure that, as a general rule, we don't let in statements from people from outside our borders, and I understand that you're interested in the issue. I understand your connection to Bob Hawke College, but in the interest of consistency, I think it's important that the procedures applied in in a predictable and transparent kind of way. Your statement has been received by email, and if it's been sent to councillors all, I assure you that everyone on that email list will have received it, and I can't speak for everyone, but they're pretty good at reading their emails and will have no doubt understood your concerns. No, I won't be letting your statement in tonight. No, her circumstances would be the same as yours. Okay, so we'll move on. Okay, Sharon, we'll say the same for yours, and that the reasons are the same. Your statement has been rejected because you're a resident of City Beach. I acknowledge your interest in the issue, but I'm not going to have a discussion with a member of the public gallery in this kind of way. Sure. Okay, Sharon, but I can't let yours in just because we know you and we understand your passion for the issue. Okay, well, I do have the discretion and I'm exercising it. So we'll move on. I'll ask councillors to confirm minutes of previous meetings. The 25th of June 2024, we held an ordinary council meeting, and that's the only set of meetings that we're endorsing this evening. Do I have a mover and a seconder for those minutes? Councillor Burns moving. Councillor Powell seconding. We can vote with a show of buttons, with a pressing of the buttons this evening, because everyone who's here is in person, so I'll call the vote now. Okay, well, actually, we've got one person whose vote hasn't registered. Councillor De Vries.
I did press it, sorry. I beg your pardon.
Okay, those minutes are accepted unanimously. So we'll move on to announcements, and I think I will make some. We should never miss these opportunities, even though I know people would like for us to get on to C1. But look, it has been a month of highs because the City of Subiaco has received its market community scorecard results. This is something which we undertake every year, and we use an external agency to undertake this task. It's a tool that we use to evaluate community perceptions, to gain important feedback, and to track how we're going as a council and a city. The scorecard is benchmarked against other local governments in Western Australia and the country. And this year we had 1,000 responses. That was a combination of people who took the opportunity or the initiative to participate in the scorecard, but also people who were part of a random sample. So this was a very high turnout, very statistically significant, and it yielded some very good results for the City of Subiaco, the best we've had in the last decade, in fact. We're now industry leaders in 17 areas. That's the most of any WA local government. The score for leadership by the Mayor and councillors and the score for City as a governing organisation have both increased for the third consecutive year, following some historical lows in the years prior to 2021. And of course, these results are not perfect. There are areas which we need to do better in. There's also areas which we're doing very well in, but the community would still like to see us put more into. And the point of this scorecard is not just to see how well we're doing, but also to find the gaps. And these gaps will be taken into account through processes such as the council planning process, which we're undertaking through a combination of workshops and no doubt a final council meeting when the time comes to formally endorse the council plan for the next few years. But let me just say, the scorecard results are a fantastic recognition, not just of City of Subiaco as a place and a destination, but also how this organisation is performing. I'd like to thank my fellow councillors and Colin Cameron and his team of 200 plus employees for your contributions to making Subiaco what it is. And just because I've got the opportunity, I will also acknowledge the work that went into the restoration project of the E.H. Parker Library. We capped off a lot of hard work with a special celebration last night at the library to celebrate some restoration works to return the much-loved library to the state which it probably would have been in when it was unveiled in the 1970s. So a very special occasion for city staff, councillors and a number of community members who took the opportunity to join the celebrations. So we'll continue to celebrate that building as a place of heritage, and it will also be a hub now and into the future, a very important community hub. This is why we do these things, and it was with great pride that we all joined together in last night's celebration. Okay, so that's the end of the announcements. Now it's time for some formal decision making. It's a relatively slim agenda this evening. 5 officer reports, in fact, and some of them may be capable of going on block, which means they're not the subject of amendments or alternatives, and we could potentially carry them as recommended by our staff right now. The on-block vote that I have in front of me, or the possible on-block vote, would consist of AR1, C3 and C4. The C1's not part of this because there's been an impartiality interest declared by someone who's not here, but an alternative motion has been submitted as well. C2 is not a part of this because Councillor O'Connor has declared an impartiality interest. So just to confirm, it would be officer reports AR1, C3 and C4 forming part of the on-block vote. Does anyone want to pull anything out of the on-block vote?
Yeah, I think C3 vote Subi Roads.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, so that leaves AR1, which comes from our Audit and Risk Committee, and C4, the financial statements and reports for the month ending 30 June. If everyone's happy to vote on those on an on-block basis, I will call the vote now. Yeah, that would help. A mover and a seconder for the on-block vote. Councillor Kosovich moving and Councillor DeVries seconding. Now I'll put the item to the vote. Thank you, councillors. The on-block vote has been carried unanimously, which means we will not be debating AR1 or C4. So what that leaves is C1, C2 and C3. Okay, well, I think we all know what the officer recommendation on C1 is. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the officer recommendation on C1, the Development WA referral for 304 Roberts Road, Subiaco? Any mover, any seconder for the officer recommendation? Okay, we'll take that as lapsed. There was no mover or seconder. Fortunately, we do have an alternative by which council would not be supporting the development. I've submitted it, and usual convention would suggest that if I've moved, I shouldn't be moving and debating from the chair. We can approach this 2 ways. Either I could vacate the chair, or if there's a mover and a seconder who would be happy enough to move and second what I've submitted, you could do so. You could debate it, speak to it, second it in the usual way.
Can I ask you a question? Is that governance says it's quite all right for everyone?
Governance certainly says it's all right. Yep, I've checked. And in case it needs to be stated, I'm happy for any 2 councillors to move and second. I think, okay, Councillor Powell moving, Councillor Kosovich seconding. You're by no means tied to the reasons I've supplied, but I'll hand it over to you, Councillor, to speak to the item, or to the alternative, I should say.
Yeah, look, I'm quite happy to support your alternative there. I think it's the right way to go. Look, and I think as we heard from the gallery tonight, this proposal by UEM Sunrise is not widely supported by the community, and that's for a whole range of reasons. And look, personally, I'm a little bit bewildered with the form of this application. To me, it seems to be underdone, almost half-baked. And as your alternative shows, there's much unfinished and undecided in this. There's the traffic reports. I think there's at least 10 issues to be addressed, from non-compliant ramps to sight lines to traffic flows to the failure to address alternate options for transport to the future-proofing of them. Traffic rate predictions that seem on the low side. Look, the list goes on. The lack of EV charging, points, the wind tunnel, but that's one of the problems with this application. In the words of the RAR, the application falls short on community benefit and it needs amendment to address engineering and planning matters. So to address some of the information we do have, the applicant is seeking 3 high-rise towers, one 11-storey, one 26, one 36, or realistically 37 stories. If you take into account the rooftop plant, like lift overruns, plant and equipment. Now, sometimes when assessing these types of proposals, you'll hear good building, wrong location. But in this case, I think it's the wrong building in the wrong location. So, thank you. So, first, the tallest building seeks a 6-storey discretion. One of the gauges for a bonus for that sort of bonus is design excellence, although I think in DevWA lingo it's called enhanced design. But as the first point of the officer recommendation shows, it hasn't achieved that with DevWA's own design panel. So that's the first flaw. There's also community benefit driven by, that's another driver of bonuses. But the RAR makes clear how it's scored on that goal. This application has provided only the minimum under the guidelines. Things like does it go beyond the required development policies for affordable housing? No. Does it do it for diversity of dwellings? No. Does it do it on heritage? No. Protection of vegetation? No. Public open space? No. Energy efficient design? No. Water conservation? No. There's no community benefit. Now, I note that the RAR, in the RAR, the officers proposed the council could support approval conditional on community benefit in regard to market gardens. And look, hopefully I'll have time to address that later. But I'd like to address a few of the other planning matters first, because I think they also provide grounds for refusal. The plans show the commercial part of the development 10 metres from the edge of Subiaco. 10 metres, that's a little bit less than the length of the front fence for many homes in Subiaco, and probably not even much more than halfway across the street. And this 10 metres has in part been gained by seeking a non-compliant setback of 3 metres closer to Hayden Button Road and Subiaco Road, meaning the development will loom larger over them to get an extra 3 metres breathing space between the oval and the development. That's just squeezing the site. On affordable housing, I think the intention is to provide 41 residences, but all in the 11-storey building, not the even spread that I think is the aim of government policy. And on that housing, much is given to the density in the RAR, how in 2019, during the LPS 5 debate, the community favoured putting density into Subi East to protect other areas of the city. Well, from my recall of those discussions, it was about the maximum was going to be 18 stories, and with that we would easily exceed our density targets. Then somehow it became 24 stories, then it was 30, and now it's 36, a doubling of height. And that also leaves a troubling question of why plump for 36 stories, then reduce the number of planned apartments and the number of residents if you're trying to achieve density targets. It's counterintuitive, to say the least. Another aspect is the overshadowing, which will fall on Subi Homes and Roberts Road and York Street, denying sunlight for up to 40 minutes a day during midwinter. And as we heard tonight, some of the homeowners, like those in Catherine Street, will also fear having shadowing effects from Subi 1 as a double whammy. And there's also residents who have solar panels, they will be affected. But I gather DevWA does not have the 3D modelling to display these effects.
Councillor Powell, your time's cut out, and just so people understand, all these things are pre-programmed just like they were in public statement time, so it's not me with my finger on the button, but I do need to ensure we're reasonably timely in this. How much longer do you think we need? How much longer do you think you need? Well, not nine speeches, 1 hour each is a long sitting. Our neighbours do that, but we have short meetings in Subiaco. A minute at most, I can allow that.
And on noise, a Landgate search on the weekend showed DevWA last week applied to have a transport noise notification on the title under section 70A. Now, maybe that's the sort of information that should have been included in this application. After all, the railway is not new or unexpected. And then what about the noise from the oval, from people playing sport at all sorts of hours? Look, I've also urged that there should be an advice note to residents, potential residents, telling them the shared user agreement for Subi Oval, that the grassy vista that they overlook is not for their use during school hours or during football games. Look, Mayor, there is more that I could say, but briefly, the suggestion about the developer contribution to Market Square. Well, look, I think that should have been part of the application as it was presented, not us going around like beggars seeking scraps from the master's table. This application falls far short of what it should be. It's a very unpopular project being driven by a state government that refuses to listen to residents and is willfully doing away with much needed active green space on a park preserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kosovich.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. I advise that I am supporting this alternative motion submitted by Mayor McMullen due to the fact that whichever way I look at what has been presented to elected members, it represents the only rational and realistic way forward for Council with this contentious development application. This is despite the fact that one of the twin towers on the site will be 36 stories and the other 26 stories, which represents a 50% increase over the 24 stories height of one Subiaco, currently the tallest building in Subiaco. I also readily acknowledge some of the more highly contentious issues with this proposal, which includes the fact that these towers will be overlooking Subiaco Oval, which is a registered state heritage site, while the oval itself, with its designated playing fields, is the sole active green space stroke recreation area for students at Bob Hawke College, and the towers will be directly overlooking these playing fields, which no doubt will impact the privacy of students. Accordingly, let me take this opportunity to assure our community that all elected members are acutely aware of just how confronting and upsetting this proposed development on our beloved Subiaco Oval has been, and further, that it has gone down like the proverbial lead balloon in the community. However, as explained by Mr Petrosky at last week's Agenda Briefing Forum, Development WA is the sole decision maker with this development application, and the city does not have any planning grounds, notwithstanding the developer meeting the 19 conditions, technical issues and other matters outlined by Councillor Powell, set out in the officer report and further amplified in the Mayor's alternative, to challenge a decision by Development WA. Neither does the city have any appeal rights to a higher authority. It is now common knowledge that decision-making for development applications in our community, with the exception of those occurring in designated heritage areas, have been removed from the purveyance of council by the state government. Succinctly, I believe it is fair to say that in the past, due to the density-focused developments in the main not being approved or stonewalled by councils across the state, the government has enacted legislation to remove council's powers in that regard. Moreover, it has been made clear by Development WA that should council refuse to support this development application, there would be no obligation on the developer, UE Sunrise, to provide a community benefit for the significant concessions being sought. That is on a 50% co-contribution basis, which is believed to be worth in the vicinity of $3 million. In conclusion, with a view to ensuring that any decision taken by council does not jeopardise the considerable community benefit at stake for the city, I believe this alternative is the only way to achieve those ends, and accordingly I commend it to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kosovich. I will call for speakers against. I doubt that there will be any. Speakers for. I'll take them in the order they come. I think that's Councillor White.
Thank you. I'll be brief. I don't think I need to preach to the converted too much on this, but just to say that I think obviously the staff report we've had to inform us is by its own words, a high-level assessment. The decision maker, as Councillor Kosovich has said, is Development WA, and I think we need to make sure our advice to the decision maker is very clear. I think it's too high. And I think other councillors have spoken to that already. I won't spend too much more time on that, but I think the equation of height equals density needs to be unpacked further, and I don't think that's a binary that we need to be buying into. We've recognised that there are density targets, but we don't have to achieve that through height of this scale. And I think there is considerable pushback and concern about the increasing height that's being put upon the community. The trade-off of a possible community benefit in relation to Market Square doesn't seem to me anywhere near enough to ameliorate the negative impact of the proposal. So I think DWA are the decision makers. We are providing advice, and our advice needs to be very clear. That this is unacceptable to us, that more attention needs to be given to a whole range of issues that have already been raised here in relation to overshadowing and in relation to the interface with Bob Hawke College, and a whole range of things about what a quality of build would be, reaching the targets that we've agreed to in the longer term. So I think our advice should be clear, and yeah, that's all I'll say on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor De Vries, I saw your hand up.
Sure, thanks. Look, I'd thank Mayor McMullen for the alternate tonight, and I support a refusal of this development application. Look, the officer's report identified 19 areas that have not been achieved, so this development application is far from ready. But I thank staff involved in the report because they've worked hard to cover all areas that can be done within the planning framework. Council's vote tonight represents the final opportunity to address our ongoing concerns, speak on behalf of our community and look to the future to consider the strength and weaknesses of this development application. 36 stories, 26 stories, 11-storey high-rise development towers, all built at one time, are definitely not the norm in Subiaco. And the complexity of the impact of this needs to be highlighted, as it is an example of what is to come when and if other lots are sold off. Some of the highlights in the officer report relates to traffic consideration, traffic volumes, traffic impact assessments on future developments, traffic direction and traffic growth rates all seem to need addressing. One standout for me is that traffic growth rates used in this assessment are deemed too low. This is quite concerning because future decisions made by Main Roads about where traffic will be an issue need to be fairly accurate. There's been discussion about widening Thomas Street, reverting Hay Street and Roberts Road to a two-way road to accommodate different types of traffic flows. So this is a really quite egregious problem with this report. Obviously, there are so many other areas which have already been mentioned by Councillor Powell, and I think the lack of adequate EV parking is another standout. Sorry. What we do know is that a 36-storey high-rise building will be out of character with the surrounding built environment, causing significant overshadowing in adjoining streets and visual impact on neighbouring properties. It is pretty much everyone else's opinion who's spoken tonight that concerns about overshadowing have not been adequately addressed to ameliorate community concerns. Perhaps the applicant did endeavour to satisfy the design review panel's recommendation for a higher, narrower build, but it has failed to consider the impact on the community, and a full overshadowing report is needed. And I'm certainly not convinced that the community will be satisfied in a trade-off with some upgrade, some funding for an upgrade to Market Square. And I agree with Councillor Powell that that should have already been part of the deal. Furthermore, more consideration needs to be given to the interface between the land adjacent to the Oval and the school. During school hours, the Oval belongs to the school and the outside community has limited access. I think there are potential concerns about the porous nature of the interface between the Oval and adjoining land. So we know under the Education Act, it's the principal who's charged with asking intruders to leave a school site.
And there are strict protocols for entering and leaving all WA schools. We actually go to quite a lot of trouble with, stamping in and out and making sure people have working with children's checks. So this porous boundary really could potentially become a problem if visitors decide to come onto the school oval during class time. So this is a first school in WA abutting a high-rise, so perhaps it is why Dev WA overlooked it as a problem. But from my own experience working in an international school in Kuala Lumpur, which was surrounded by apartments, none were actually adjacent to school grounds, and locked entry points prevented outsiders from accessing the school premises. We can learn about how schools and apartments coexist by looking at countries where that is a norm, or even to the eastern states where it's become more commonplace. We can be bold and try new things, but we don't have to do risky things in the process and make irrevocable decisions that mess up school safety protocols. On the matter of undesirable land use that permits future licensed premises in the close proximity to a school, it would seem from Dev WA that they've made changes to the PMH design guidelines to restrict this. So I hope and trust that similar changes can be made to the Subiaco East Master Plan to address concerns, particularly about the zoning, as I said, to permit licensed premises. Excuse the pun, but it does not pass the pub test. And we know about another 2 minutes? We know about the ever-diminishing loss of green space. Just to let you know that in 2022, Council actually got a report from Curtin University which updated the Subiaco's Cardno report on active spaces, which recommends 6.5 square metres of sports space per person. Well, we know there's going to be a shortfall, 9 hectares in Subiaco. So this obviously becomes a bigger concern. Can I continue? And obviously, the lack of schools, and that's not really a planning consideration, but it's something that we should consider because Pob Hawke's full next year, Perth Modern's a selective school, Shenton's overflowing, and the demountable classrooms are the only way we can service the intake. So I'm hoping the state government has a plan where they're going to put these new students, because they'll just need to find somewhere to put them, and hopefully not on green space the little bit of green space we have. So again, I go back to apartment living is not one of our preferred approaches to living, and I accept the fact that that's changing. But I think we need to really start to learn from other countries and try and get the best possible apartments, best possible outcomes for the future in terms of all those considerations. And I don't think this is going to solve the housing supply problem or the social housing problem, because the kind of social housing that I would personally like to see is ones that are supplied by and paid for by the state government, not by developers. So I don't think we should be afraid of what's going to come, but I think we should definitely ask for what we think is right for our community. And it's definitely why I support this alternate. Thank you.
Next speaker, Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mayor. We can't support a hypothetical application. We have to look at what's been presented to us, and this application is deficient in many ways. Developers have the option of working with the city's planning department to identify these issues in advance, but in this case they chose not to do so, and the result is an application which has 19 matters for consideration. The city would not approve any other DA with so many outstanding issues, and I do not believe it should support this one. Doing so would be to send an inappropriate signal about the need for developers to work with the city in good faith on future applications, and I think that's what we want to encourage. We've also heard from many members of the community about their concerns with this development. While Dev WA may be free to ignore community concerns, as a council our job is to voice them, especially since we're being merely asked for our opinion in this case. Given that high level of community concern and the clearly inadequate application, I don't see any way that we could support the development, and I therefore support the alternate motion.
Thank you. Another speaker. Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Mullen. I won't repeat the issues. I've been editing my talk as we've gone along, so I'll focus on the things that perhaps haven't yet been talked about too much. Development WA created detailed design guidelines for Subiaco Oval and the Railway Precinct. They are guidelines, they're not requirements, but I would nevertheless have expected that any development should be largely consistent with those design guidelines, and as we've heard, in terms of height, this building is not. And there are other areas that I'm concerned about with this particular development in its current form. The design guidelines state that development will be oriented in a manner which discourages overlooking of school open space in recognition of Bob Hawke College. Notwithstanding, upper floors will be sited to maximise views to surrounding regional landmarks and open views through development sites. In addressing this guideline, the application talks about the height of the towers and establishing a prominent landmark site within the precinct, and that people have significant views over the precinct, and argues that that statement makes the application compliant. It says nothing in that assertion about Bob Hawke College or discouraging overlooking of school open spaces, of which the Oval is the largest. The modelling in the application, which sets the tone for the development, actively makes a feature of the orientation of the proposed buildings and how they overlook the Oval. While the 36-storey building is turned so the apartments don't directly look over the Oval, the majority of balconies in the 26 and 11-storey building do, even when some of them could have been oriented to look in the opposite direction over Market Square. Furthermore, the proposed ground floor food outlet under the 36-storey building actively overlooks the Oval rather than being oriented to overlook the Heritage Plaza or Market Square. During the day, that will mean people will be dining out, overlooking children playing sport, children they have no connection to, which makes me uncomfortable. The incomplete nature of this application in relation to these factors and others listed in the alternate recommendation mean I cannot support the application in its current form, and I support this amendment, this alternate. I'm also very concerned that we have a situation where we have design guidelines for development adjacent to the Oval used by Bob Hawke College that are different from those to the guidelines for development opposite Perth Modern School on the old Princess Margaret Hospital site. So there is a lack of consistency about how to approach development of this nature on these sites, which I think needs to be addressed by Development WA before we proceed any further. Thank you.
Thank you. By my count, there's 2 elected members who haven't spoken yet. Councillor Burns. I'm still pondering. Okay, we'll leave you for lucky last. I'll enter the debate. I use the term debate loosely because generally to debate means to argue about something in a formal manner, but we're not arguing at the moment, as far as I can tell. We're all in step with each other on council, and in fact we're in sync with our community, despite the rigour with which the public statement procedure is sometimes applied. The fact of the matter is we understand what the community sentiment says about this development, and that's why we find ourselves here today debating an alternative. I'm not sure I can top Councillor Powell's statement about begging for scraps at the master's table, and perhaps I shouldn't try. But geez, what can I say? This is a planning decision, and what I've done with this alternative is to use the very reasons set out in the officer report. By our staff's own assessment, this proposal falls short providing community benefit, and it requires amendment. And when you're dealing with planners, as we are with the Development WA staff, you have to speak planning speak, and that's why it seems this council is going to turn the recommendation to Development WA around and say for a number of reasons this development cannot be supported. What we do want to do, however, is have our cake and eat it too. Should Development WA be inclined to approve the development, then what we do want to see is maximum public benefit. And this ties in with something I've heard councillors speak about tonight and previously as well. That at the moment we've got no certainty, we've got no commitment from the developer as to what benefit is going to be provided. And that's why we shouldn't be begging for scraps. We should be feasting as part of this new, vibrant precinct. As I understand it, the developer says that it needs another 2 to 3 weeks from about today to finalise their benefits package. To me, that's too long. If they wanted to be ready for tonight, I think they could have been. They've got the best. They've got the best consultants available. They're no slouches in property development themselves. If they wanted to be ready, they could have. So one of the reasons for putting up this alternative in the way that I have is to signal our dissatisfaction with the application in its current form, but to leave the door open on discussions about benefit and also the various flaws in the proposal. I know that our planning staff have connections totally professional connections with the people at Development WA, and they know the developers' consultants as well. So if there's mutual will to continue the discussions, I have no doubt that that those will continue. However, there's only ever so much that we can do, but we'll do our best. Look, I'll just close by saying the City of Subiaco has a single opportunity to provide formal comment on this development, and that's what we're doing tonight. We are formally resolving what we think about this development, and I would thank councillors for considering the alternative and for what seems to be some pretty strong support for a way forward, which I think represents community sentiment, but also makes the best out of the situation that we find ourselves in. So thank you for your consideration. I'm not sure if any other councillors want to debate or not. Councillor Burns, final speaker, and then we'll ask Councillor Powell to close. Councillor Burns.
Thank you, Mayor McMullen. Look, there's nothing more I can really add to it, but I will ask the indulgence of our community in the fact that probably in the first 2 words of both the staff recommendation and the alternate that we're dealing with, and it's the second word. It's a referral. Okay, so as I opened with, it's the indulgence of the council that, you know, I mean, we can't stop this. Okay, we can do as much as we can, right? We can, you know, I mean, add everything we possibly can with our expertise and the expertise of our staff and the support of our community. But at the end of the day, we're making it, you know, I mean, we're just adding our 2 cents worth. And I hate to say 2 cents. I didn't mean it in, you know, in the way one might use that expression. But obviously, it's fully supported by the councillors. It has the support of our community. I think we'd all probably wish it could be more, but I don't see that I don't think that more actually gets us much further, unfortunately. But I'll leave it at that. As I said, I'll leave it to Councillor Powell to summarise, and we'll go from there. But again, unfortunately, our powers are nothing but to comment. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Burns. Councillor Powell, your chance to close.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and I will. Look, I want to thank my fellow councillors for their contribution to this debate. I think it's been very helpful, especially raising matters such as the Cardno report and the need for more public active space, you know, the orientation of the building against the guidelines, sending a clear message about where we are and asking developers to work with council. I think they're all important points. Look, this proposal potentially represents the biggest mixed residential commercial development in the city's history. So it's important to get it right. It's important to know all the facts. And as I've said, this application, I think, falls short on that. And I'm going to bring up one thing that I noticed in the RAR, and that's that the government, through Dev WA, is listed as the landowner. That's despite the fact, as was mentioned in the statements, that on October last year, the Planning Minister said the land had been sold to UEM BHD for $22.19 million. Look, a Landgate check on the weekend showed that the state government is still the landowner. So I wonder if there is a reason for this seeming rush, meaning making this document fall a bit short. And perhaps that might be a condition that makes approval part of this sale, and maybe there's a time frame on it. Look, I don't know. DevWA has not been forthcoming about financial arrangements, but I think it's important for us to know, because potentially we'll be the ones dealing with the outcome of this project in the future. So we have an important stake in it, and we should be privy to the actual deal struck between the state and UEM. And look, it may be unwanted advice, but whether there's anything we can do about it, I would say to UEM, if this deal is not set in stone, you can walk away. This is a very unpopular project being driven. And look, you know, you're going to have to tell prospective residents about the shared user agreement, that the grassy oval they overlook is not for use during school hours or during football games. There's going to be noise notification on any certificate title. Look, they're not good sales points on what is a highly unpopular project being driven by a government that doesn't listen to its residents. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll call the vote now. Okay, the motion's carried unanimously on a vote of 8-0. Thank you, councillors, for the debate. Thank you, public. I'm sure you'll all stay on for items C2 onwards. Or not. We will move on. C2, the Responsible Authority report for 424 to 428 Hayes Street, and 440 Hayes Street as well, I should say. We've got the officer recommendation for refusal, and on this matter, we're simply submitting our Responsible Authority report to the JDAP. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the officer recommendation? Councillor Powell moving. I think I saw Councillor O'Connor hesitating. Councillor O'Connor, will have you seconding.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, when I think about Subiaco, I think of a green inner-city heritage suburb. Heritage that is part of the key that defines us. We are an old local government. Indeed, the establishment of Subiaco predates federation. It came before the formation of the Commonwealth. We have a very long history, and that's why we have considerable heritage. That's part of what makes us what we are. The oldest part of the city and the site of the first home in Subiaco was in this Seddon precinct. These buildings between 424 and 428, 440 are really all that we have that remains. In fact, the other buildings that were on the corner of Rockaby and Hay Street were knocked down by this very same developer who's put forward this application. So look, I feel it's doubly painful to be back here again. This incessant campaign by a developer to knock out an important part of the city's heritage in the centre of the city and replace it with mock heritage, what the developer originally termed readaptive use, a term that doesn't even exist in the heritage language. So I commend the Responsible Officer's Report, or the RAR, which I think captures the history of the developer's efforts to demolish this row of shops and theatre. That is the council's refusal to issue a demolition permit, followed by the developer's claim that the buildings were unstable and in an imminent state of collapse, the subsequent closure of Hay Street, the traffic chaos and diversions, the hit to adjacent businesses, all based on that claim. Well, an independent heritage engineer engaged by the city said that that was not the case. In SAT, all parties agreed that the theatre was not at risk, but it's still subject to this demolition request. And the remaining shops at 424 to 428 are still in SAT, and hey, they're still standing. The consulting engineer has supplied photos showing a crack in the wall that was about 40 years ago, and it hasn't changed since. And added to that, there have been monthly checks which show no movement in the building, no change in stability. As I said, this has been said in SAT, where the lawyers pointed out that testimony is sworn and there are penalties for not telling the truth, which is not the case in SAT, where no such penalties apply for not telling the truth. And look, a little bit more history. The applicant has made 2 failed attempts with the WAPC to impose an improvement plan, which included compulsory acquisition of the city's freehold land in the former Burley Lane, a move that the city described at the time as underhanded and a backdoor way of advancing commercial interests of a private landowner. And look, the arguments are no stronger for the applicant on the heritage side. Anyone with an appreciation of the value of these facades will appreciate their importance to the streetscape. So, starting with estate planning, it says, but where there are instances where full or partial demolition may be considered, all avenues to conserve the heritage protected place must be at first explored and exhausted. This demolition plan is inconsistent with the aims of LPS 5, and I think many residents will record that that's a pretty contemporary document that was strongly debated just a few years ago. Demolition does not satisfy the considerations of State Planning Policy 3.5, and demolition is inconsistent with Local Planning Policy 3.6 in that it does not conserve a place of cultural significance. Demolition will detrimentally impact the significance of the heritage area. Demolition will impact the amenity and have an adverse environmental character and social impacts. And demolition will impact the community as a whole, resulting in a loss of sense of place. And look, on the application for the new shops, there are grounds for refusal, such as the at-grade parking, which is visible from the street. So, but look, finally, if demolition is granted by DAP, there's no power to make the developer build those faux shops. And as ugly as the scaffolding and hoarding that hide this heritage, it's still better than a potential weed lot.
Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, Mayor McMullen. The application before us does not present a good heritage outcome for several reasons. The buildings proposed for demolition and replacement have been identified as making a considerable contribution to the Rockerbie and Hay Street heritage area. Despite changes over time, they retain the overall form of buildings constructed over 100 years ago and contain many of the decorative features and characteristics of the period. They can still easily be read as from an earlier time, along with the other buildings nearby. That's why they're part of an identified heritage area. Heritage areas, like heritage buildings, are vulnerable to incremental change. The removal of fabric time after time changes the character of an area and diminishes its cultural heritage values, and progressively it can destroy what the community considers important. The demolition of the former cinema and the row of shops would not be a small incremental change. It would be a dramatic change. It would have a significant impact on the cultural heritage values of the heritage area by removing the only section of early buildings from that part of Hay Street, leaving it one-sided. And part of the important contribution these buildings make is to bridge the gap in the historic fabric on the opposite side of the road of Hay Street, where there is a row of shops that's been identified as making little contribution. So your eye is guided down the road from side to side on looking at those heritage buildings at the moment. Of course, there have been changes to the fabric of the subject buildings over time. That's to be expected of buildings of this age. Repairs that the owner himself has made, such as fixing lead-like glass and replacing deteriorated window surrounds, are normal practices, and they are consistent with good heritage practice. Changes to allow for adaptive reuse, such as modifying the residences at the rear, are also appropriate in heritage buildings. They do not significantly diminish cultural heritage significance. The replacement of these buildings with this specific development proposal is also not a good heritage outcome because it too closely mimics the current heritage form. The Borough Charter, which is the primary guiding document on cultural heritage in Australia and also is recognised internationally, is clear when it talks about new work. that imitative solutions should be avoided. The reason for this is that they can mislead the viewer and diminish the strength and visual integrity of the whole. What that means for a heritage area is that because this development too closely mimics the form of what it replaces, it has the potential to devalue the other buildings in the heritage area. It confuses people about what is actually old and has cultural heritage value and what is fake. There are examples elsewhere in town centres similar to Subiaco where heritage shops have been incorporated into new developments, and the successful outcome at Watley Crescent on the corner of 8th Avenue and Maylands is a good example of this type of work, and it is so disappointing that the owner of the shops and former cinema has not considered something similar for this particular site. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll take any speakers against, which would mean that you're going against the officer recommendation and supporting the development. Okay, any speakers for the officer recommendation, i.e. supporting a refusal? If not, I'll ask the mover to close if you'd like. You've got to be quick, Councillor. You want to speak? Yeah. Okay.
I didn't realise you were winding it. I apologise. Thank you. To me, I tend to look at these things from the other side of the street, literally. The buildings, are obviously important. They become more important every day. Time does that to them. It does that to everything, except for people. But I don't think enough consideration has been given to the effect of curtilage, a word that I use often and hadn't heard from a long time until the councillor just smiled at me, used it the other day. But there is protection offered to the Regal Theatre, probably more importantly, even and in two different regards. The Subiaco Hotel and the Regal Theatre both actually have rights. Okay, they have rights as to how they're affected by their surroundings. Okay, they have a right to exist, and for a building to exist, it must have a purpose. The Regal has a purpose. The Subiaco Hotel has a purpose. That purpose is diminished by the removal and damage to the surrounding areas, being the curtilage. And I'm happy to see that Alex, our director, is nodding, unless he's looking at something else on the internet there. Right, but he did nod, so I'm going to take it. It's with regards to the curtilage. And I think the decision makers need to consider, beyond the removal, the damage done to two dreadfully important buildings, dreadfully important to our community and to Western Australia, but actually dreadfully important nationally in the Subiaco Hotel. The Subiaco Hotel one day will get its verandas back on. It will get its spire? What's the spire? Thank you. I don't know, I got that one. They'll come back. The Regal, is always never doing quite well. It's difficult, okay, but it marches on and has enormous protection, and they deserve, both those buildings particularly, and many others. Where Chutney Mary's is, it's not in great shape, but it could be put together back to its former glory eventually, and also one day perhaps enjoy its verandas, back onto it. So that's where, to me, the damage is done. Okay, it's you can look at it. Sure, we want to keep them, but what's it doing to everything else? Okay, and all I'm trying to offer you to think about, look, obviously, I have your support. I'm just drawing your attention to the fact where the damage lies. You know what I mean? It's not the removal, and Councillor Powell makes a very good point about turning it into a grass lot for a while, as opposed to what it is. The scaffolding can stay there for decades, as far as I'm concerned. I'd rather it stayed there than was removed, no matter how ugly it is. Okay, and on the hope that its chances of survival continue. But the powers that be that consider this matter that we're reporting to, really need to look at what it's doing to two buildings that have been identified by this nation as extremely important to the whole country, the Subiaco Hotel and the Regal Theatre. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other speakers? I'll ask the mover to close.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's been canvassed fully and properly. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll call the vote. Okay, the officer recommendations carried unanimously with a vote of 8-0, which means that we've got a single agenda item left. It's C3, the Subi Streets project. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the officer recommendation in relation to the commencement of this new project? Councillor Powell moving and Councillor De Vries seconding. Councillor Powell.
Yeah, look, thank you, Mayor. I pulled this out because I think this is something that's quite good and something that we should be advertising that we're doing, promoting it a bit. Look, I'm in support of the proposal because I think this is about vision. Unlike the two previous items on tonight's agenda about dotting the I's and crossing the T's and the finer details of planning language and laws, this is about planning for the future. It's about big thinking. It's about collating information about all of Subi streets, the laneways, the parklets, and coming up with an overview, a strategy about how to treat them in the future. Putting some of them into categories, grades, priorities. Yeah, I mean, imagine residents being able to have a pretty good idea of what the future intention is for their street. Look, at the moment we are being affected, I think we all know, by the inner city blight of too many cars, not enough parking spaces, congestion, demand for facilities, art spaces, all that sort of stuff. But at the moment we've got a rather ad hoc approach. And I think this plan offers an overall better approach, a strategic approach, and one that can even be tied to budget considerations. So look, it's my understanding that this proposal is the first of its kind in Australia, and it's most likely only possible because although residentially dense, our land area is fairly small. Look, I'm not thinking that this is going to be easy. Neighbours don't always agree on what's best, and nor do streets always agree. So getting harmony might be difficult at times, but good things are difficult. And I think what separates a good council that does parks and roads and lights and waste well, and a great council, what separates them is vision and insightful strategic planning for the future. And that's what I think this does. So I'm thankful for staff to bring it to us, and I'm happy to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor De Vries.
I didn't come tonight prepared to speak on it, but I want to speak on it because I was extremely excited when this came to us in a workshop, because I do see it as a very visionary project, one that will really give us an opportunity to fully appreciate what makes our community so unique. We have history in our streets. The street I live in has certain huge-sized verges which happen to be there because of what happened 120 years ago. I think the way that we're looking forward with the past in our mind is going to create an opportunity for really creative thinking about how to use our verges, what we do with our laneways. It also has this wonderful additional benefit that it can identify small-scale street upgrades that can be fast-tracked. So there's also this visioning in on finer grain detail as well as the strategic thinking. I think it's also
preparing us for some really significant changes in the future when it comes to car usage. And we know that this is not just a single body of work where we put EV stations. We've got to have thinking around people wanting to be out on the streets, wanting to talk to each other, re-engage in the community like they once did on streets. So I think this has a huge benefit for social wellbeing as well. So, I'm just so happy to speak to it tonight. And I think that as an Australian first, we're very fortunate to have such good minds behind this. And I look forward to hearing more about it in the next coming months. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor White, speaking for. Well, unless anyone wants to speak against, we'll just take speakers for at this point.
Okay, thank
Over to
you. And thanks to Councillor Powell for making sure this came off the en bloc. I had a bit of a brain freeze, but I'm really pleased that we're actually getting the chance just to speak to it. And thanks to staff for putting this up. I mean, I think it's actually a very exciting proposal, action that's being taken, and I just want to give it the fullest support possible. I think it's really something that's going to contribute to the social, economic, environment benefit of the community. The whole idea of a movement and place framework that's going to be structured around our streets, and I think is important. I wanted to highlight one or two just very quick things. It's streets and laneways, as Councillor De Vries has already spoken about, and I think this whole opportunity to see that we have many of us have laneways at the back of our premises or on the side, or in some cases both, where these really do present an opportunity for upgrading, for greening, for making more user-friendly, for making them part of a stronger, cohesive part of our community. And I think this initiative really is the start of an initiative that can really do that. I think the idea of streets that are better for walking and better for biking and better for social interaction and all those kind of social connection aspects is very strong and something that is exactly what local government should be doing, and I think it's great to see that we are taking the lead in this. The issues of al fresco dining, of parklets that we have on some of the main streets, the improvement of the design of those, having a more consistent one, and really building up the value of those is going to be important. Of course, there are many priorities that I think will need to be identified, and staff will do that, both big and small streets. I think, Rockaby has had some attention given to it in recent years. Hay deserves further attention, and I think Onslow Road in Chendon Park also possible priorities for something of this nature that could really benefit. And finally, all I want to say is I think this really does present a great opportunity for partnership with the community. Top-down design and infrastructure development and all of those things blending with a bottom-up community engagement and ownership of these sorts of initiatives. I think it's something we'll be very proud of in the future, and I really, again, thank staff for the fantastic work that they've done in getting this going. Thank you.
Any other speakers? Councillor Burns.
Thank you, Mayor McMullen, councillors. I'd like to briefly comment on some things that I wish I had have come up with, but I'm actually going to quote Enrique Peloso. Enrique Peloso, if you don't know, was the mayor of Bogota. Doesn't go there anymore because they want to kill him. But basically turned one of the shittiest places in the world into one of the nicest places in the world over a period of only less than a decade. I had dinner with him, and some of the comments he made, although I think he's slightly misconstrued on some points, but you look at a footpath. People think a footpath is something you get out of your car on to walk into a pharmacy. It's not. Okay, footpaths were meant to be places where you stopped and said hello to people, where you kissed your wife, your husband, or your kids, goodbye. They were social instruments. Okay, what Enrique did to Bogota, there's no part of Bogota from one side to the other you can't cross without actually stepping off grass. So he put. They had where there were no footpaths, the footpaths are 10 metres wide, okay? But something I'm not going to go on and on. I think you get where he came from. He used to be the second greatest mayor in the world after Giuliani, so I'd suggest he's the first greatest now, because that twit certainly shot himself in the foot. But something that really drove home to me, and I'll finish on this note, right? That Enrico said, he goes, what right does whoever in their Porsche or Lamborghini or Mercedes or anything, okay, have to erode more than a 12-year-old little boy or girl on a bicycle that's their only method of transport to get to school, okay? And that's, it always stuck in my mind. We think about roads and cars, right? But they're objects for far, I think the kid on the bicycle trying to get to school, okay, actually has more right to that road, okay, than somebody, and I shouldn't be having shots at Porsches and whatever, any vehicle really, but it's a bit more of a dramatisation when you say Lamborghini. But anyway, look, so I support the motion, okay, but I don't think it can go far enough. How we turn streets and footpaths into actually community objects, as opposed to objects that serve a purpose singularly towards transportation. I'll leave it at that. I think you know where I'm coming from.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Going once? Going twice? Okay. He's thinking about it? No? Okay. I'll ask the mover to close then. Okay, nothing to add. Okay, well, thanks, councillors. I will call the vote. Thank you. The recommendation or the motion's carried unanimously. Well, councillors, there's nothing left on the agenda. There is no urgent business to deal with this evening that I'm aware of. No elected members' motions that have been submitted with notice, so I will therefore declare the Ordinary Council meeting of the 30th of July 2024 closed at 7:11 p.m. Thank you, councillors, for your input, and thank you, staff, for your assistance. Thank you, members of the gallery too.